Hey, everybody, it's been a while. Paul Elam here. The book right here is Make Men Strong Again, The 12 Pillars of Traditional Masculinity. The man who wrote it is right here with me, Elliot Hulse. Elliot, welcome. How you doing?
All is well, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a fan of your work, seeing you in documentaries and videos and stuff. So it's cool to be here with you.
It's great to have you. So one of the first things I usually like to ask people that stumble into this, how did you end up in a joint like this? What led you to this particular area of life, dealing with men and masculinity, especially with the gender politics that are going on in the day? Usually guys have a story, a bad divorce, a bad relationship, something happened in their lives to make them rethink things in life about men and women and masculinity. What's your story in that regard?
Well, I have to start by saying that I grew up with what I would call an alpha male father, real strong dad. He came from Belize. He didn't grow up in America with American politics and American media and the American school system. He literally was a jungle boy. He grew up with bare feet, climbing trees, and it was literally the law of the jungle. And so to be a strong man meant survival. And he came here to the United States in the 1970s, Brooklyn, New York, and met my mother, who's also from Belize, and they raised a family here. And growing up in a home where, I had that kind of father, it was sort of counterculture in my home, where a lot of my friends' dads were like fat and funny dudes, and my dad was lean and mean and tough, and I resented him. As a result, I resented the fact that he had boundaries, strong boundaries. We had to come home at a certain time. We had to, there was just rules and discipline. That was his main thing. And that wasn't the case for my neighbors. That wasn't the case for my friends. And so, of course, I didn't like that. And of course, I grew up watching American media. And so, when I started to I get into the idea of what it is to be a man, I was quickly told or shown that the way my dad is toxic. I got a toxic dad. And I took that, I kind of took that literally when I was a young man, my teens and in my 20s. My dad just doesn't get it. Well, it wasn't until many, many years later I find myself with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and I'm mentoring to young men in fitness. But of course, that spills into all areas of life. And I start hearing stories about the challenges that they have in their lives with women, with their own sense of masculinity, their own sense of being, and the real deep struggles and anxieties and depressions that the men who are sending me questions from all over the world were struggling with. And it quickly dawned on me this was 2007, between 2007 and 2016, that I'm experiencing the fatherhood crisis. I'm experiencing, through these questions and conversations I'm having with young men worldwide, the tremendous lack and hole in these men's hearts that wasn't there for me. I had a little bit of anger because of a story I was told, but these young men's lives were devastated because of lack of father or because of weak fathers. And that transformed my mindset completely about my relationship with my father. And I think every man would say, or most men would say, that, the atonement with the father, your biological father, is an atonement with masculinity. It's a coming home to oneself. When I was able to accept my father, I was able to accept my own strength and masculinity in that way. So to answer your question, it was being confronted with the carnage that I was seeing out in my gym and on the internet with the loss of fatherhood in our culture.
So is the loss of fatherhood, is that the core issue in the loss of masculinity? I mean, your book says make men strong again, as though we
Mm-hmm.
were once strong and somehow we've lost that. We've
Mm-hmm.
lost our strength in masculinity. We've lost our strength as men. What happened?
Well, an attack on the father or an attack on the mother, because there's definitely an attack on femininity in our culture. It's so much more insidious. Is an attack on the family ultimately, and that's the way I see it. And in my research, what little I've done compared to an author like you, I found that in this modern age, a lot of what we're experiencing in our culture that's degenerate towards the family and towards the father, you could say started roughly around the Bolshevik Revolution, the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and the idea of communism spreading west with the cultural form of Marxism, getting, Antonio Gramsci and Mark Lukas speak of the culture being the new battleground and needing to infiltrate the schools, the media, the government, all forms of education and entertainment in the culture, including the church, in order to destroy, topple the West from the inside out, let it rot from the inside. And these very clever people who, I don't know if they were purely evil people or bad people, but their ideas were bad, and what their intentions was bad, and that was to liberate sexuality, which is another way of saying destroying the family. Liberate men from what it is to be a man, liberate women from what it is to be a woman, liberate people from quote unquote sexual oppression, and so it's where we're at right now as a result of those ideas infiltrating our culture.
There's a sort of a challenging area of this I wanted to explore with you a little bit. One of the things in my examination of masculinity over the ages and the discussions I've had many times with men who are studying these subjects is that, there's a problem that once you define masculinity, for instance, I think masculinity is easily described in some very positive terms. There's strength, there's a commitment to family, there's being a protector, there's being a provider. All these things that we typically consider masculine traits are also the same things that we do things like manipulate men into illicit wars by selling them. Here's this, if you're a real man, a tough guy, a protector, a provider, a worthy man, you're going to run and fight for the cause. How do we deal with that and not get suckered in by our balls, so to speak, into things like illicit wars or into marriages with unworthy women? I mean, there's a lot of areas where if we start pushing a defined model of masculinity, saying you need to be this, it does make us susceptible to being misled into things, if you follow what I'm saying.
Right. And I think our ancestors dealt with the very issue that you're talking about through rites of passage or initiation into manhood that gave it meaning that was specific to those that people, the people of the time. Well, to be defined as a man that is to be useful. If you really had to boil it down to one word, I would say that's it. If you're a worthy man, that means you're useful. What are you useful for? And when I'm going to backtrack for a moment. When a girl is born, her the definition of her use, what she's used for, is inborn in her. They have the superpower of giving birth, and that is the most precious thing that a human being can do, and it's one thing that they're gifted with. So if we're not talking the type of ideological subversion we're under right now, where women think they're men or it's better to be men, we're not dealing with that. You would come to see that, well, a woman's gift is innate, and it's written out for her, and she wants to aspire to it, and it's easy. In other words, she doesn't have to figure it out, right? You're like your mom. You got to.
Women have to be, men have to do.
Right. So then the boy is a blank slate. That's the big difference. She's written upon, he's a blank slate. And that blank slate is impressed by, well, it should be impressed by other men, fathers, grandfathers, uncles, cousins, older boys, because with that blank slate, they are all opportunity, all potential. And so what does society or the people or the family or the tribe hold dear is what they're going to imprint on the boy. And so that initiation is done in such a way to make him useful, but also give his life meaning. And so in our day and age right now, so with that blank slate, our because we are so different, I guess, from what I'm romanticizing, we have more of a collective meaning, a secular meaning, a, a really an uninspiring meaning, and it's grown more and more or less and less inspiring over the generations. And of course, it's I could sweep it with it's capitalistic. It's capitalistic, right? I love capitalism. I like making money, but then when that becomes our meaning, our sense of meaning, and why we send people to war, why do they send the boys to war? They're not sending the boys to war to truly defend some strong virtue in the society. It's for, well, oil. It's for power. It's for the rulers, the oligarch, the leaders to line their pockets, and you're just used as fodder. So I know that was sort of a roundabout rant, but
Well, no,
that's where I'm
I think
talking.
it's a really complicated question. It's a really complicated topic. I was thinking more along the lines of, if we go back to World War I in Britain, the White Feather Campaign, that all that women had to do in order to get a man to walk into the meat grinder of World War I was to hand him a white feather, that the insult to his masculinity would be so strong from this accusation of being a coward that he would rather go die than to receive that white feather. And so I think you mentioned, and you make several references to red pill philosophy in your book. I was really glad to see that, because I'm offering that as part of the solution, is
Yeah.
that there is an awareness that comes that I think a good, strong man should laugh at that feather instead of going off to die for it. And so it's one of the reasons I was so encouraged about your book, is that you don't shy away from that type of information that I think is leading men to be stronger. Another question born out of that, one of the things you said early on was that you think men should either marry or go monk, one of the two, and that that you didn't have any criticism for the monk lifestyle. As a matter of fact, I mean, I think if we're looking at it biblically, we can find plenty of prescription from Paul in the Bible for that. Uh, but what I'm wondering is, what percentage of, when it comes to marriage, what percentage of women do you see as marriageable in this
Wow.
current atmosphere?
So I can go only based on the experiences that I've had and the experiences that I've heard, because I am not dating. I am not out in the world speaking with women in a way to, make them my wife. I've been married for 20 years. I married my high school girlfriend. I don't have a lot of that experience going on, but I listen to my clients. I listen to my students. I watch my friends as they go. Every single one of them seems to go through divorce. All of my wife's friends, every single one of them seems to go through divorce. And so to ask like what percentage, I don't know, but I know that it's not easy and it's getting harder and harder. And the more that I try to have hope, the more I realize it may actually be hopeless. I think we got to set ourselves apart somehow, but it doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't. And now, to be fair to you, you didn't explore that concept very much. There was just sort of a touch and go on that. But your intent of the book, it's very short, if guys can see it. The intent of this, and he states it in the book, is to get to the point and not fill it up with a lot of fluff and extraneous stuff. And I think you did an admirable job of
Thank you.
getting that done. I want to ask you about lifting. This is the very first section of your book. Um, Tell us why that's important.
Well, one of the gifts that makes us men are rugged, rough, strong bodies. We got bigger bones, stronger bones, bigger muscles, testosterone, all kinds of things that are, like I said, a gift. And as is with any gift, if it's not used, you lose it. And there are those who might wonder, like, well, I don't need to do anything any longer. What's the point of having strength? But the use of a thing, or the what would you say, the fruit of a thing, the end of a thing, is not always necessarily the how would you say, the means and the end, right? Like the means is the end when it comes to being strong. Your mind changes, your body changes, but your mind changes, your hormones change. You're just more consistent with what you've been built to be. And so we do it because we're built to do it, because the means is the end, but the end also is a tremendous gift.
You know, that's something I found with what lifting I do, is that there's a strong connection between that and what's going on in my head. It's undeniable that if you lift for a while, even if you are not doing much weight, if you just do it for a little while, you will see a noticeable change in your mentality and your attitude toward life, and the way you carry yourself, your feelings of confidence. Those things, sort of things, get boosted. Why do we resist that so much?
Ah, so I discovered this word effeminacy about 2, 3 years ago while reading Thomas Aquinas. And he says that in man, there's a tendency towards effeminacy, which is an attachment to pleasure and an avoidance of pain. And he says that it's a part of the curse. It's part of the fall. And so men, as men, our default would be to, how you'd say, be derelict in our duties. It's laziness, but it's a vice.
Okay. I think I think that probably sums it up. And I'm glad to hear this because, a lot of what, and it's almost like a running joke in the red pill community, just lift, bro. Um, because it gets reduced down to, if you just pick up weights, your life will suddenly become magically wonderful. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. It's too reductionistic to look at it. But there is such a body-mind connection that if there was, I had a couple of areas in the book I wish you would have explored a little more. I think
Mhm.
that was one of them, that there's this huge connection. It's not just gym talk to say lift. It's lifestyle. It's your cognitive abilities. It's the way you feel about yourself every day. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm glad you gave that a sense of priority in there because it is important.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. It's top of the list for me.
What else is important? If we had to, let's say we had to reduce this down to three pillars of masculinity, what are the other two besides lifting that you would say are most important?
Well, being real, being truthful, uh, being transparent, being our real selves in a world that wants to constantly try to steer us into the mass psychosis. I'd rather have my own little personal psychosis. But I think that's where we lose ourselves first and foremost, is through lying to ourselves, through accepting lies, through expressing lies. That's really where we begin to lose ourselves. I remember reading a book that oh, where is it? Right here. Live not by lies. Live not by lies. Live not by lies. Right, by Rob Dreher. Um, and as he describes what people in Eastern Europe experienced, during these times of revolution, it was the most dignified thing to state your truth, even if it meant your death. And of course, we live in a time and in a place where maybe that's not the case right now, but it would really, it would be a good litmus test as to, who is a real man who's going to stand by his word rather than live by lies. That's number one.
That's a great point, and I think it's a very important point for guys in the red pill community. Most of us, I say us because I'm a part of that, but most of us have to feel like we have to remain silent in the
Right.
word. That if we go to our church and say what we really think, they're not going to want us there anymore. If we speak out at work and say what we really think about something, we can end up out of a job. We
Right.
can end up, even with our own families, persecuting us. Uh,
Right.
so what do you say to guys that say, "Man, I'm not going to give up my livelihood and end up on the street in order to speak my mind"?
Well, I don't have to say anything because the rot begins from within, and every man knows if he's in integrity or not. Are my thoughts, words, and deeds in alignment? And it hurts. It hurts our power. Like, a lot of guys play video games. Our power level is diminished when we're living in lies. So, it's not a matter of seeing and rebuking that in someone. It's self-effacing.
I can't argue against that. I have to agree with you. There's a price for being real and authentic in life. For anyone who's real and authentic, they'll pay a price for it. The question is, do your values mean that you pay the price, or do you hide? And I believe when you hide that things rot. That's part of
Yeah.
what our failure to respond to gender feminism has
Right.
created a rot is every bit as significant as the feminism itself,
Yes.
is our failure to respond to it. How about one more, another area?
I like thou shalt defy, defiance, saying no. Saying no is so important. So if truth is our sword, then no is our shield. And once again, we live in a time where the shields are down and we open our hearts to be pierced by, any woman, any hot girl that walks by, any perceived authority, right? Maybe someone in a white coat, or because they, have the American flag behind them, because they are from some NGO, non-government organization that is trying to rule the world. Oh, well, they must be right. We got to do what they say. We got to follow their lead. And, right along with speaking the truth is saying no. I'm not going to go along with it. I'm not going to take that drug that you're forcing on us. I'm not going to participate. And that's very masculine and required defiance.
Absolutely. I want to apply this to on a little bit more personal level, just to get your thoughts on it. Frequently, I mean, most men in the West operate on this model of romantic chivalry. There is somewhere in there, there's a guy that's either on a white horse or he's down on his knees with jewelry, begging to be loved for the rest of his life. The word no doesn't figure into those equations very much. Men seem to be wired to go for the yes whenever they humanly possible, and sometimes when they can't. I mean, I've known guys, and me being one of them in my youth, it didn't pay his light bill because he was spending money on women. Uh, that is weakness. But what are your thoughts on this whole notion of romantic chivalry in marriage, in relationships with women? Is it healthy anymore? Is it an appropriate way to bond, or do we need to connect in better ways than that?
It's funny, growing up with my dad, like I said, he's rough around the edges as an alpha male from the jungle. Um, I heard stories of how my dad was very unromantic with my mother. Didn't buy gifts, and when he did buy a gift, it was like, something silly. It didn't propose to my mother, get down on a knee and do the whole ring thing. It was more a matter of like, hey, like, let's just get married. My mom still complains to this day. Mind you, they've been together for 50 years,
Mhm.
and my mom still complains to this man is not romantic. But I will tell you what, she can't get enough of him. It is the most attractive thing in the world. I see it. She wiggles and gets upset like, this man. But the attraction that's associated with giving women any feeling, right? Most of the time when you're being romantic, you're trying to give her a feeling that she's already gotten probably 10 times that day. She's bored with being put on a pedestal. Women are bored with being put on a pedestal. We've overplayed that card. If you want to stand out, you do. I'm not saying do this out of trying to be a bad guy, but literally live by your own code. My dad just doesn't do gifts on Valentine's Day. He thinks that's stupid. He's not trying to impress my mom or reverse impress her like a lot of like dating guys will teach you. Like, here, go do these things that are totally against what you actually want to do because it may turn her on. No, a real alpha man lives by his own code. And if he wants to give you a gift, he's going to give it to you when he wants to give it to you.
Okay. I mean, I think you answered that definitively. How about is the average guy strong enough to do that anymore?
I think if he gets a taste of that type of empowerment, he'll be able to do it. But we've been spoon fed this narrative about, respect all women, listen to women, follow women, give women a chance, that you've had your turn, man, sit down. Right. So like it's hard. It's I don't want to say it's hardwired, but it's like wired into us so deeply that a lot of men, myself included, couldn't even fathom that there was another way. And of course, I was seeing it at home with my toxic dad, but I didn't want to be anything like him. So
Yep.
even the concept itself, it it offers like cognitive dissonance. Like the first time a lot of guys hear something like you don't believe all women, it's like, wow, what are you talking about? And so anything that's associated with the things we're saying is gonna like rub a lot of guys wrong way, not because they're bad guys or they're simps, but it's because they just don't know. Nobody's told them and they haven't taken enough time to digest it.
Um, But I noticed, I mean, this is not a criticism. This is a great discussion. I wish it would have been in the book.
Mhm.
Because this is at the heart. I mean, our relationships with women is at the heart of a lot of the dysfunction. And here we are, we're running on this romantic model that's been around about 1,000 years. Um, and long enough to definitely be woven into the fabric of who we are.
Yeah.
And couple that with feminism and you end up with a nation of simps.
Yeah, it's deadly.
It's the combination romantic chivalry and feminism
Mm.
together is a tumor agent that grows big, fat, crazy, toxic tumors into relationships. Maybe if you write a follow-up to this, you can address some of that. Um, I want to touch on another thing, shifting gears here. You're a Christian, and this is sort of woven throughout the book. The idea of maybe not a Christian God, but of being connected to something greater than ourselves. Is that a part of masculinity?
I think it has to be because, well, the peak of masculinity in its generative form is fatherhood. Right. I mean, and that's not denigrating anybody who's built great businesses and empires. I mean, those are amazing things. But every man can be a father. It can be a king in that way. And I don't think it's any small coincidence that Christ is the first to refer to God as the Father. I think it's significant that he uses that word father. That the word father itself, from what I understand, the root word pater, where we get, pater noster, our father. Pater is also consistent with the word pattern itself. And I don't want to go too far in left field, but the term archetype that's often used by Carl Jung and neo-Jungians, it has everything to do with the order of the universe, the order of the human being, the order of the world. It is the blueprint by which the world manifests itself. As a man, you are made in the likeness and image. I don't want to even use that term. You are patterned after the eternal pattern, the divine pattern. And in a way, that puts you as an agent of God, as a creator, as a pattern maker, a father.
Well, yeah, at least in the Western tradition of Christianity, you have a hierarchy there, God, man, woman, children, in that order. That's repeated over and over again throughout the Bible, and that seemed to be what worked for forever until we screwed it up. Did we make a mistake giving women political power?
I do think so. I think the splitting the vote, that's what it was. When women got to vote, we were splitting the vote. And it had everything to do with splitting the family. Like, how could it be that a family has two diverging ideologies such that one partner will vote Democrat and one will vote Republican? That is a splitting of the family. So by giving the woman the right to vote, you destroy her family because she's no longer a part of a unit that votes together. I, you know, of course, this is, I don't know if this is historically correct, but I know that there were limits on voting for men, right? There were times maybe you had to own some business, you had to own some property, whatever the case may be. Well, that makes sense to me because you have some skin in the game, and you're a part of something bigger, and you have investment in the greater society for the development of your small thing. When we, as a family, when we vote as one thing, well, number one, it recognizes the family as a legitimate unit, but it means that this is all under the banner of one ideology, one set of values, one set of virtues, one set of beliefs. And I think that's really what's voting when they vote, is the values. And so if we split the family values because we want women to vote, then we destroy the family in the long run.
It makes sense. I mean, when you look at voting patterns, women vote left, men vote right, and just trending in that there is a division there. There's a dichotomy that coming out of the family with many families canceling out each other's votes. Um, it's pretty bold statement, and I've made it myself to say that it was a mistake to give women all these political power. Should we repeal the 19th Amendment? Is that going to be part of our solution going ahead?
I don't see that happening.
I don't see it happening either, but it's a hypothetical that I'm just
Yeah.
tossing at you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we were bombed back into the Stone Age, like some people say, then, everything goes back to right order.
Yeah,
So, in that case, well, we'll probably see it then. But I don't know how we can affect that change where we're at right now with voting.
I think that's a great segue into another question is, uh, I mean, things are, I think you're on the formula. How to make men strong again. I think it's right on, and I suggest to the guys in my audience, this is a worthy book to read. Get it, check it out. It's on audiobook too. It's short, it's to the point, and it's accurate in so far in every way that I can say. Um, but how do we get there from here? This seems to be, I mean, a lot of guys are saying now that it will literally take the collapse that you're talking about, either bombed into the Stone Age or total economic collapse and chaos. That again, the old saying that easy times produce, soft men down the road till we end up with needing hard men again. Is it going to take, is there a way to do this without some kind of collapse?
I don't think so. I mean, history does not point in that direction. Even just the story of the Old Testament. I mean, God has to chastise us, and then we course correct. And I think that's just a part of the evolution of the human creature. We're just going through these cycles. Sometimes we forget, sometimes we're manipulated. And in some ways, it's just the way things are. So, but moving forward, or maybe the next chapter in this saga of humanity, is probably going to look a lot like the previous chapters, where when it gets burnt to the ground, there's still an ember, right? And that small ember catches fire, and that the small ember are just the small families, the small the virtues and the values that are held within the hearts of a segment of the people, right? Those people are like embryonic. So as everything falls down or burns down around it, that one ember, that one embryo will catch fire and proliferate. It may take 1,000 years, but that seems to be the pattern.
But in the meantime, following these rules, these objectives toward masculinity will make, I think, any man more capable of dealing with whatever's to come. We could be looking at economic collapse in our lifetimes easily. This is, I mean, we could be looking at World War III fairly easily within our lifetimes, the way things are going. I suggest guys be prepared for that, and I think you provided a good roadmap for them to do that. Um, Fatherhood is a theme you keep coming back to, that you revisit this over and over again. Why is this so critical for you? Just that father-child bond.
Well, I'm a crusader for the father because I see how the father has been denigrated. And I am a father and I have a good father. I know what a good father looks like. You got to understand that because the culture has been so destroyed, there are millions of young men that do not know what a real father looks like, what a real man looks like. They have no idea. And if one showed up in their face, they would reject him immediately. Now, I'm going to say this, and I'm not saying that Donald Trump is the 100% alpha male guy that everybody should be looking up to and or anything like that, but he is the closest thing to a masculine icon that we've seen in the White House in a very long time. The backlash that he received, even from men, is evidence of the type of effeminacy and feminism that is, deep rooted in masculinity. These men reject Donald Trump as a father figure, which is what a president is to the nation, in all his masculine bravado that he shows. It's a hatred against their own fathers, and it's a hatred against themselves as a result. And so we can't love ourselves as men if we don't know and love our fathers and the Father.
Well said. Let's talk about the church for a moment. Most of it, and I've been writing as a Christian for a little while now. I'm talking with a lot of Christian men, and probably 90% of them don't attend church. They won't walk in the doors because what they get from the pulpit is male bashing and kowtowing to women. The church seems to be reflective of our society, unfortunately, in that way. How do guys that are interested in having a church, what do we do about that? I think it's a remarkable challenge right now, because I do think the churches are just as gynocentric as they can possibly be.
Yeah. Yeah, every single one of them. And I've heard a line that goes, as the church goes, so does society. I don't know if it was St. Augustine or somebody, but as the church goes, so does society. And we see it from the top down in terms of the church. The magisterial body, like the leading body of the Catholic Church, from the top down, the Pope. I mean, from what I understand and what research has shown me, the Catholic Church has been infiltrated. And so there's a really good book called Infiltration by Dr. Taylor Marshall, where he talks about, well, essentially the Freemasonic infiltration of the church in order to topple it from within by installing something like 1,500 homosexual / communists into the convents in the 1950s. And of course, each one of those neo-communist homosexual priests are the ones that are, creating the sex scandals, right? They're the homos that got put in there deliberately. There's a book called The Devil and Bella Dodd, where she was an agent that helped make this happen. So it's all historically documented. And then, of course, Pope Francis. Now, I'm not speaking out against him, but he behaves very much like a globalist. And so when it comes to your question of, the church, we could see from the authoritative body of the Western church that it's destroyed. But then it trickles down, because I look at Protestantism as a form of feminism in a way. It's about breaking away and going our own way and protesting and reading it the way we want to read it. And I'm too good for an authoritative body, and that all authority should be mistrusted, and that we got to go and do it our own way. I'm strong and independent, right? I see the Protestant Reformation or Protestant revolt as I'm strong and independent. And I think it's of the same spirit as what we see in feminism right now. So everything that's a splinter off of the Catholic Church in the West, of course, is going to pale in comparison as well. It's not doing any better. And in many cases, it's even worse. They have priests that are women and all kinds of weird stuff like that, gay churches and things of that nature. So what do we do? Well, it's interesting that it was just Easter the other day, and we followed Christ to his passion. One of the things we know about Christ before he went into his passion is that he was betrayed from within. He was betrayed by one of his 12. And we also know that the church is going to follow Christ into its passion before it dies and resurrects. And right now we're being betrayed from within. Now, I ask people this all the time, like, do you reject Christ because of Judas? Oh, no, of course not. He snuck in there and he screwed things up and he sent Christ. Well, that's exactly what's happening right now. Do you reject the church because of the infiltrators, because of the bad guys that are in there that are steering the boat in the wrong way? Uh, like we're experiencing. So that kind of like, I don't know, I don't want to say it excuses the church, but it puts some things into context. What do we do? I could go down that rabbit hole if you want, but I'm going to pause there.
Well, sure. I mean, but there's only so far that we can go with doing this. It's a very difficult chore. I was thinking also of many Protestant churches, and you'll find them out there where you will hear a ton of anti-feminist rhetoric from the pulpit. You will hear, uh, you know, uh, talks against homosexuality, against all kinds of what the Bible considers sin. And they say there won't be any female preachers, there won't be any female elders, no female deacons, no females teaching men in Sunday school. But if your wife's abusive, you better man up and take it.
Oh, yeah. That one's, yeah, that one's baked in.
It and that is also it's to and I think the point that I'm trying to make is that I agree with you. I think feminism and Marxism have had a terrible influence all the way across our society, including the churches. But our notion of romantic chivalry with women is almost like an antagonist you throw into the mix to a body that already has cancer.
Right.
Um, and it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Um, and I'm not pretending I have answers. I don't expect you to have a complete answer to what to do about this. But somewhere along the line, I think it does involve men standing up in churches and saying enough is enough.
Well, one of the things we're seeing right now is a huge movement in the Catholic Church towards traditionalism and the traditional Latin Mass. And the more it's suppressed, the more it's obvious that this is the way back for men. See, men, when we go to church, we're not necessarily looking for entertainment. We're not looking for someone to look to be our superstar from the stage, like a Joel Osteen. Men
Right.
are attracted to sacrifice. And if you consider what the mass actually is, it's referred to as the sacrifice of the mass. Every Sunday, Catholics participate in the sacrifice of the mass. Now, how sacrificial is the mass? Well, if you go to a traditional Latin mass, you're going to sit there for an hour and a half or up and down, kneeling, standing, praying in Latin, and you're going to be offering your sacrifice to the Lord through true devotion and worship. It's uncomfortable. And I think that's what's attractive to men. So this movement, I think it's really spreading fire in like the Zoomers, Gen Z, like they're craving like the Roman Empire. They're when I say that, they're craving like old school traditional discipline and prayer and worship. And it's catching fire. So I think that's where the ember that's going to catch fire once this whole thing burns down is in that, the small traditional Catholic movement that is catching fire.
Excellent. Elliot, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you feel like is important about this book to get across to my audience?
The first thing that comes to my mind when you say that is that the zeitgeist is full right now with alternative ideas about masculinity and femininity and intersexual dynamics. The red pill is pervasive, meaning like you can't not know that there are people with these opinions now. Right? I mean, everybody, even if you're completely against it, you have heard these opinions voiced with fervor and passion in a way that I don't think has happened in the past 100 years. Probably past 1,000 years, because I don't know if masculinity in the family has been under attack to the degree that it is right now. So, my book, I think if it was written, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, may be more significant than it is right now. And I'm not saying that, to denigrate or to say anything bad about my book. I'm saying it like my book is a sign of the times and that there's a lot of people talking about this right now. I'm not the only one. And that's a good thing because it means that we're just going to continue to build on top of this. I think the manosphere or the red pill movement or, the pro-masculine movement, and like all this, however you want to lump it, is evolving, clearly evolving, growing. Of course, it can grow some cancers as well because of the void. There are, I don't want to say charlatans, but there are guys that'll sweep in
I'll
and
say it.
perhaps, yeah, they'll take you the wrong way because it's emotional.
Yep.
When you discover some of these things that you're talking about, red pill, that hurts. And you could be filled with rage, and you can allow that to turn you into a cold shell of a man. So we got to be very careful. And I tend to, when I discovered this and I knew I had a voice in this, I knew that I needed to submit myself to an authority, because to be a man is to have an authority. Every powerful man in the Bible has the authority as God the Father, or Yahweh. Wherever there's a king, the reason why his crown points up is because he's being guided from above. And so if you are engaged with or listening to, or following anybody else, ask them where is their authority? Who is their authority? Even if it is simple as, hey, my dad was my authority. But even better, Christ is my authority. Even better than that, God is my authority. Of course, one and the same. And with that, I believe I made myself safe from the ego's tendency to sweep up and become a guru. I think there are a lot of gurus out there. So I don't think true masculinity can really unfold in the West the way it's designed to if there is no Christianity, if there is no church.
Okay, fair enough. And what of guys that don't have religious convictions? I mean, a lot of my audience is in this more secular community, and that's fine. One of the things I've encouraged over the years is that if you don't have a God to believe in, that's, between you and whatever belief system you want. But if you're not attached to something that's greater than yourself, to an idea, a cause, something that's more important than you, then you're lost. I wonder your thoughts about that. Can secular guys have something that replaces God?
Yeah. And I don't want to risk dipping into heresy, but God is within you. God is within you. That's biblical. No one can argue with that. Whether you believe in God or not, you're stamped with God. You're made in the likeness of an image of God. And God is closer to you than your own heartbeat all the time. And we have a conscience. I don't remember where in the Bible. I'm not a great Bible scholar, but somewhere it says that God says to one of his prophets that I will inscribe my law on their hearts. And I think Paul affirms it when he talks about how the pagans even know right from wrong. You don't need the gospel to tell you right from wrong. God is inscribed on our hearts. And I would encourage you to have a conversation with that conscience, with that voice, the voice within. God is there. And if you ask the right questions and you're open to receive answers and feedback, and you're open and having that conversation, you're miles and miles ahead of most guys who are literally numbskulls. And they're just, if they can't see it, taste it, smell it, and touch it, and it's not referenced to the T in every, in the Bible or whatever, they don't believe it. I think that requires a bit of softness and openness and a willingness to explore that relationship with God.
Amen. Once again, the name of the book is Make Men Strong Again, the 12 Pillars of Traditional Masculinity. I'm talking to Elliot Hulse. Elliot, how can folks reach you on social media? What's the name of we're going to link your channel below, but where else can people find you on social media?
Well, you can just go to makemenstrongagain.com. That'll take you to the book site that has links to other things. And you can go to Elliot Hulse, 2Ls, 2Ts.com. That's I just converted it to a link tree. So you'll just get all my links and stuff there. So yeah.
We'll put those in there. Is there anything you want to add before we close up?
Paul, I would like to say that I appreciate the work that you've done and your voice in this space. I came across you when I was just waking up to, the things I'm speaking so passionately about today. And I see you as an elder. I see you as, as a father figure for the movement. And I'm glad to be associated with you. And I encourage everybody, well, if you're watching this from my channel, maybe I'll re-upload it if I get your permission to
Oh,
go check
absolutely.
out, yeah, Paul's work.
Okay, folks, there will be links below, links to get his book, links to his websites, links to his YouTube channel. This guy's on to something. Let's give him a little bit of support. Elliot, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Would love to have you back again sometime.
Thanks, Paul. And we'll repay the favor. I'm going to get you on my show when I launch my podcast again.
I'd love to do it. Take care, brother.